Well, good morning, everybody. Now that we're 5 days into the month of October, I was just thinking back about the growing season and wanted to just look at it in terms of stats here. Now, I do realize that when you look over such a long span of time, this being from May 1st, October the 4th, that you're not going to be able to capture the nuances of the season. What we've got here are precipitation ranks during kind of the majority of North America's growing season here, at least here in the United States. Now, I understand growing seasons are different in different parts of this country, but May to October or beginning of October, that's what we're going to look at. Now, when we think back on this season, we'll think about the episodes of drought that have been throughout the Midwest, right? So we saw the spring, May 10th to June 28th drought. Then it got really wet in this area, okay? Then we went back over after August 15th, all the way up until about now, where it's been dry again. And the hardest hit place here in the Corn Belt, we could make an argument, would be this section of Iowa. Come down to southeast Kansas, pockets extremely dry. But then you get on the other side of Kansas and then run up the kind of the western plains to the Front Range. Right now, there are parts of that area that are experiencing their wettest such time period. So again, May to early October on record. The southwest monsoon was a failure to launch. That may have been one thing we actually did get right in the forecasts. You come down here through the Delta region and just notice in Louisiana right now, we've got 2 climate reporting districts reporting the driest such time period in their meteorological history going back 131 years. New England has been hit by one hurricane. This would have been Hurricane Lee, the remnants of it hitting Maine. We had multiple widespread flooding events that hit New England, and we have another hurricane, not hurricane, but tropical system, Philippe, that's going into this area. And I just looked at this, and I made a case over the last month that oftentimes, as meteorologists, we over-attribute an upcoming weather pattern to El Niño or La Niña. And I'll be honest, when that began was after 1997. The 1997 El Niño event was so prolific across global news consumption that many of us, like I was a young man then, I was in high school back at that point in the 90s, when we were, brought up, that was what the most dominant weather factor was. But I just want to show you something here, okay? This was reality. I've been staring at this map now for a while. This is what El Niño would have told you. May through September of our El Niño year since 1963. And as you look at it, okay, we could say this made sense and this made sense. Maybe this as well. But throughout the rest of the country, looking at these precipitation anomalies, composite precipitation anomalies, history is not serving as the best long-term indicator. It's a part of the story. We use it all the time to help indicate where we think, history might lead us in terms of how this pattern compares to the past. But the one beautiful thing about the weather is it's never repeated itself. Like I find that absolutely fascinating. Nonlinear chaotic systems, like the atmosphere and its behavior, the fluid dynamics of it is such that the complexity does not allow it to repeat itself. In fact, one of my colleagues at the University of Illinois attempted to do a simulation, and he simulated 50,000 years of weather and basically found and tried to correlate any given year to any other. And they just don't. They don't look the same. And that makes things kind of fun. Now, there are things that you can rely on. I mean, the continents are placed where they're placed. The oceans and their currents are where they are, which means there's predictability in the system. But it is not something where we can look at the past and say, this is exactly how it's going to play out. And I got to remind myself of that, and I'm reminding myself that publicly in front of you today. So here we go. This is what September and October look like for those El Niño years, right? So we talked about this back in August, right? We said, hey, September and October tends to favor these 2 wetter areas. And I said, the reason is the subtropical jet, so watch it. We just said, let's watch it. It's been there at times, but it has not been the dominant factor. So I just need to remind you of this, because right now, if this is what September and October's in the past have looked like, this is what this one currently looks like. Now, we're not through October yet. We've got a lot more days in October. But where, we would expect maybe a little dryness here and here and here, well, so far we've been wetter there. We had a major rainfall event here, and we've seen plenty of rain in Northern California. And where we expect, I'll kind of draw those same 2 lines through here. These have been areas that there's been moisture coming through, but there's a lot of places in through here that have been very, very dry. I mean, look at this map. This, again, all of September and the first 4 days of October, looking at precipitation ranks. So we just have to understand that it's a combination of seasonal and subseasonal factors. The seasonal being El Niño, that's one of the big ones. the subseasonal, like the MJO, or the movement of all of the different teleconnections we like to look at. And I'll show you those, at least one of the more important ones, in a few moments. But as it stands, we need to just take an assessment of where we are. And that's why I keep taking you back to these maps that look at, for, in this case, soil moisture percentile. And because of the lack of that historical average coming through with an El Nino, we find ourselves throughout much of the Mississippi, Ohio, Great Lakes, Delta region. This whole basin has got very, very low soil moisture. And what I worry about is, I was talking about the same thing in my videos a year ago. And this problem of having low soil moisture hung around all the way through winter. It was there in the spring. Spring rains began to undo it. But remember, those spring rains stopped on May the 10th for a big part of this area. It didn't come back on until June 28th, which is summer. So we just need to watch this very carefully. And I'm going to come back to the same things I've been telling you about. And that is going to look at what the Mississippi River is doing. It's just our largest river system. As you know, it drains 40% of the land area in the lower 48. It's the largest system, including the Ohio and the Missouri and all of the other major rivers that get into it. It's the largest system of flat, navigable water space on Earth. And then you think about what it does. I mean, it carries out, I believe it carries out something like 60% of our ag belt production in the midsection of the country. And of course, it's critical for bringing a lot of stuff back up the river. And I'm getting lots of reports from friends that are out on the river right now that have just said, this is so low, sandbars are popping up. We've seen barges break apart. So I keep talking, but the data tell you the story, right? A year ago, we were at about 7 feet below low stage. We popped up to about 5 feet below low stage, and then we bottomed out on October 20th to about almost 11 feet. Now, recently, we've seen a little bit of water getting back into the river, so we're at minus 9.27. But the point here to make is that we got low on the river much earlier than we did a year ago. And I need this to verify. I need this to verify in order to prevent this river from getting any worse. But the problem is we're in October, which means rainfall in this section of the country inhibits, it really inhibits fall harvest. But we need it also for fall fertilizer application. It's a really, it's kind of a catch-22, I guess, or it's a problem where one thing helps one area but doesn't help the other. So I just want you to keep that in mind as we kind of just think of the overall structure of the way the flow set us up right now. Last night was pretty amazing. If you were down in Texas, take a look at the size of these storms in through here. Just ripping off massive storms down here in Texas. And this was pretty well forecast. Remember, we had the lead wave. We had that little kicker on the backside. Remember the short wave we talked about that helped initiate this along this decently sized front. And what's happening with what's left of this is going to start to move its way up into the Ohio River Valley. Again, an area that needs the rainfall. Looking back over the last 12 hours or so of total accumulated precip, I mean, this thing came through producing a lot of hail, some straight line wind damage, and an isolated tornado. But the frontal boundary is still sitting right in through here. And we're going to watch that wave that's on this kind of walk along that frontal boundary throughout the day today, increasing rainfall totals in an area that desperately needs it. I love seeing rain get across the river, but we need more than just this. Now behind this, we have our first of two pushes of cold air. The first one's going to come through. It's got a drop in temperatures, but we're dropping them from where they have been, which is in near record territory. So the first one's going to drop us to normal. The second one's going to drop us to cold. And I'll show you that in a few seconds as well. First, I did want to point out last night's hail events. You can just see them. This is the last 24 hours of hail, and a reminder that when you start to see these shades of color, these brighter shades, we're talking about 2 to 3 inch hailstones being detected by radar. If we go from there and just look at the last 48 hours of total accumulated precipitation, some locally extremely heavy rainfall coming through part of the U.S. And I just want to make a comment here. I do have one viewer that is from this part of southeast Kansas, and I would like to just address. He's put a lot of comments out there, and I want to address this because he's 100% right. There are counties, and this isn't just limited to Kansas, by the way, that every time we see a system come through, we have watched the frontal boundary almost just lose what it had to make precipitation and kind of jump over a region. We've seen much heavier rains to the south and north out of this, And this region, I went back and looked over the last 2.5 years, has got a substantial deficit that I don't think is fully being captured on a statistic like this because it's too big of a climate reporting district. So once again, we saw that area have some isolated rain, but we're working our way up here to a pretty massive local drought in this area. And the drought monitor is too broad of a statistic, I think, to really capture it as well. So, I do want to point that out. There's a solid case to be made for some of the comments I'm getting about this particular region. I apologize. I tend to keep this 60,000 foot view of everything, and I don't often dig into your exact, anyone's exact location as we go through this. But what's changing right now is, here's front number 1. So just over the last 24 hours, this is where the temperatures have cooled off. We have some places cooled off up 25 degrees. That got parts of Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, Northern Illinois back to normal temperatures. But this is just the first push of colder air. See it right through there? And what we're going to watch is, as I kind of just play this forward, just stepping it through, that push of colder air starts to make its way. But this is the one we're going to watch tomorrow really dive in. So see it, there it comes. This is the real front, I guess you call it. That one's when makes it farther to the east and south. Look at it coming down through here. And by the time we get into the weekend, now notice this, into the weekend, see how the winds clear out? Calm winds, clearer skies, higher pressure, equal frost. And that's what we're going to be watching here. Meanwhile, we do have a couple of tropical systems that need discussing. This is Philippe, and this is Lydia. And Lydia is meandering around through here and still potentially causing problems for Mexico and possibly into the Gulf of Mexico. So we need to just make sure we know what's going on with those. I'll show you those in a moment. But those are out there toward the weekend. So let's get through the end of this week first. Early this morning, just taking a look at what's going on with the rainfall here in the models. Now, this is modeled. You're going to be able to see the progression of that heavier rain out of Arkansas, Missouri, into southern Illinois, getting into western Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, most of Indiana getting some rain today, some locally heavier amounts, and then that presses through by Thursday. Now, this is the shower activity coming in on the real front, the colder one that's coming through here Friday morning. And that's going to dive in, see it there, and sweep through parts of the Midwest, bringing some isolated rain. That's not much at all. And then that's going to sweep into the deeper low here. We have the combination of two different low pressure systems over Ontario, and they're going to sit through there and spin. Now, this is what's going on with Philippe. This is the frontal boundary, and there could locally be, now this only goes to 1 p.m. on Saturday. This is just a 60-hour run. That's all the longer this model goes. But we do need to pay attention to the potential for very heavy rainfall throughout New England this weekend. Another thing to take note of, we could get some lake effect precipitation, not snow, but precipitation out of this. And on the northern side of the Great Lakes, though, we are watching for some snow. Now, as you notice on Saturday, this is when what's left of Philippe starts to come into New England. So let's go have a look at the latest on this. It's a tropical storm right now. It's expected to weaken, but it's going to be getting pulled into that low. So what you just saw kind of, okay, we had low number 1 come up like this. The second low pulls into that, and then Philippe gets wrapped around the backside. So sitting here over Ontario and Quebec and parts of the eastern Great Lakes in New England will be the combination of a tropical low, a weaker low that came out of the Pacific, and then a stronger, much deeper upper level trough that actually originated over the Aleutian Islands, moved through Canada, and ends up in this area. So if you trace all this back, it comes from 3 different major source regions. Now, after that, the Atlantic is a bit quieter. We only have about 25 days left in this hurricane season. But we got to turn our attention back over to the Pacific, where we're going to watch Lydia meander. This is an odd bird here. It might end up coming back like this, combining with more convection here. And as we talked about, I need to know where this is going to end up going, getting steered in this direction by the subtropical jet. So as it stands, the new 10-day forecast has now increased the probability in the Bay of Campeche of something developing. Now, if you want something in the Bay of Campeche to come straight north and deliver rain, you've got to have a ridge here, and we don't. I mean, if we had a ridge here over the southeast, okay, this would be hot and dry for the southeast, no good. But if we had a ridge of high pressure sitting in this area, this would actually deliver all that rainfall to the places I told you that it's not getting delivered. It's a missing piece of the flow. But because there's no ridge here, whatever comes out of the Bay of Campeche will likely move in this direction. So let's go have a look at this and just understand what's controlling that flow. I need to piece together the next part of this so you can see it. Remember us talking earlier in the week about the P&A? Every time you see it going up like this, that's a ridge in the west. So through this weekend, western U.S. ridging. Now just remember, because of the size of the United States and the typical length of the trough ridge pattern that moves across the planet, this ridge in the west means trough in the east. So we're cold east. Now watch. This is going to be a trough showing up in the west by the time we get out there to next Wednesday, Thursday. Western troughs tend to produce big central United States storm systems. So we're going to watch for that dip. But then we're going to see this come back up again. Now the zero line is here. So what is important in terms of the trend of this forecast is you take this whole sinusoidal wave pattern, move it down. That's the way things looked last week. Now it's mostly up here, which means the west sees multiple ridges and therefore probably stays quite a bit warmer than otherwise. So what does that mean? Well, take a look. This is through this week. There's the deep trough that ends up anchored here, 3 different pieces to it, all sitting over parts of Ontario and Quebec, eastern Great Lakes, spinning. And it's going to spin for a few days. It has no reason to keep moving. It's got a closed low on it. It's going to sit there and spin. And it's going to produce some snow on the northern side and wet weather east. Here's the ridge. This is part of that positive P&A pattern. But as we said, it makes one dip. There it is right there, middle of next week. Now, this trough coming in is going to send this guy right here through the mountains and eject right here midweek to late week next week in the plains. Now, anytime I see a trough with a forward tilt coming out of the mountains and ejecting here, says we got to watch this whole area for potential for strong to severe storms, a deep low that's going to curl up, potentially some heavy rain. And to be honest, there's a little bit of a ridge helping it out. Now, if that guy was here, oh man, we'd be in business. But it's still a system to be paying attention to. This is the same one yesterday we did the European ensemble analysis of. I'm now showing you that it's still there in the models to be watched about a week from right now. So that one comes through and it moves to the United States and we go back to where we were. More ridging across the western United States, higher heights, and troughing east, which means we're going to keep the east cooler longer. Okay, let's go have a look at all of it. Let me take you back. See, I was already looking at that system next Thursday, Friday. It's in both models, but let me take you back to where we are now. So we've played through Thursday into Friday and Saturday, and this is where the low curls up, high pressure moves into the rest of the country, and that's what gives us this frost event we'll show you in just a few seconds. Notice how the models, as we get into Sunday afternoon and evening, are trying to pull that snow in through here. The GFS more aggressive than the European, but the European makes that snow, makes a little ice in there as well. This is now early Monday morning. So for the rest of the country, we're kind of just on hiatus here for precip. I do want you to know there will likely be some cloud cover around this and some wraparound showers around this upper level low. By the time we get into Monday, Monday afternoon, I want to watch this. The next trough coming into the Pacific Northwest. There's Lydia. And I know it doesn't look like much, but this could be the area of tropical convection we got to keep an eye on. That's Monday getting into Tuesday and Wednesday. So notice the GFS over here is taking Lydia and pushing it right into Mexico. And at that same time, whatever was sitting here got pushed out into the Gulf of Mexico through the Bay of Campeche and is pretty heavy rainfall that could hit Florida. Keep an eye out, Florida, next Wednesday, Thursday. And while all of that's happening, a much deeper trough is settling into the Four Corner States. And this is the one with a positive tilt that comes out next Thursday. And now what we see is a low in this area. Now that's been in the models for the last couple of days. Let's keep an eye on it. It's out there, but it's now in the operational runs. And to be honest, take a look at the map. The GFS and the European are agreeing that something is there. So that means we'll be talking about this for the next 6-7 days as being a potential system, and then we'll really dig into it next Thursday, Friday as a larger system in the central United States. We need it. We need that rain out of this. So until then, if you are a Midwestern farmer, watch me right now. This whole area, though, just remember, until then, you've got wide open windows. There they are. So take advantage. Your only issue would be some isolated showers, and if you're close to this upper level low, that's where the problems are going to be. So there's going to be some wide open harvest windows happening after. That's after the rainfall I just showed you from the high-res models, this event right here. So we're out today for a lot of folks under this. But once that front clears, we're going to open it up for probably 4 or 5 days of uninterrupted harvest. All right, what's next? Let's add up all the precip. This is the next 7 days according to the European model. So let's get out there. There's the next system just starting to cook next Wednesday, Thursday. See it in the midsection of the country? Now, while that's happening, see the flow coming out down here into the Bay of Campeche. Otherwise, it's this system and the one coming in the northwest. Now, that's, again, that's 8 days or 7 days in the Euro. Let's go have a look at 7 days in the GFS and just keep adding to the GFS because it's really putting down a potent system here in the Midwest. And it's going to carry the heaviest rainfall from these two systems, one being tropical across Florida, the other extratropical into New England. So notice how heavy the rainfall amounts could be in New England by the time we get out there to Monday the 16th. From here, let's go take a look at snow. Look at the European model tossing down that snow in Ontario and Quebec. And then later, with the deeper trough that comes in, more snow for the Rocky Mountains. There's already been snow in this area so far this year. All right, finally, moving out of precipitation and on to temperature and a bit of a long-range discussion. This is the new week 2 forecast. Now, there's a lot of differences here in the models. The latest European came in much wetter on that week 2 system, and you can also see the wetter conditions here. I'll be anxious to see what we get out of the CPC later today, see how their forecast evolves. Now, this morning, we do have on our all hazards weather map a large area of frost advisory. So this is where we are, that's not a frost advisory. Let me get my colors right. That's freeze watch. So large area through here of a freeze watch coming through with this next shot at colder air. This is where I've got temperatures getting down to frost or below over the next 7 days from the National Digital Forecast Database. But I'd make an argument that even though you're seeing the gray in through here, take a look at what these low temperatures are going to do. There's Thursday morning. Now watch. There's the cool down happening at Friday. Starts in Montana, moves into the plains. That's Saturday. But notice, throughout Missouri, Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, we're going to be seeing low temperatures flirting with the mid-30s. And what I want you to understand is that there'll be patchy frost with this regardless. We talked yesterday about Sunday being the coldest, getting the front all the way down to the Gulf Coast. But we also know that this is going to be followed by a warm-up. So this is out to next Tuesday, Wednesday. There's the more mild air coming in. And remember, we're going to watch this mild and unstable air come in after Wednesday as that low shows up right here and pops out of the plains and goes through this area. That's the one that's going to be potent next week. Overall, though, next 5 days looks like this. This is day 5 through 10. And because the PNA stays above that 0 line, where does the cooler air stay? It stays east. And that's been a forecast evolution of temperatures we've seen throughout this week, favoring cooler air in the southeast longer than otherwise forecast. Now, I started off this video, if you remember, it felt like a century ago, but we were talking about El Niño and how it's not really played the most dominant role in what we've seen so far. There's been other factors that have controlled it. So I'm going to tell you something. This is what the new outlook for the 10th of October to 10th of November looks like. It trended a bit drier in this area. That's not terribly dry, but it trended drier. Still has the wetter stuff in here, but I'm just going to tell you something. We got to live right now, week by week, with this pattern because I just don't think any sub-seasonal forecast model will be able to capture what's really going to happen. I mean, one upsetting event like a big typhoon that curves into the North Pacific or, a reinvigoration of the subtropical jet or some tropical system sneaking in somewhere. I mean, all of that can still mess this up. So I don't have any confidence. And I'm telling you all of this ahead of later. Today we're going to get new European weeklies out. And I record the video too early to get them for you, but I'll put them in tomorrow's report. But that's going to give you a new winter outlook. I guarantee you the winter outlooks are going to look like El Niño is going to dominate everything. And we're going to make a case for that tomorrow, so be on the lookout for that one. All right, last thing I want to show you. I want to play for you an animation of satellite-derived rainfall over the last week. And I want you to see what we've been watching in central Brazil. So you can watch it. I'll take the cursor off the top. But daily, we've had precipitation events throughout central Brazil. And as a result, this is what's prompting, better planting conditions in this area, and they're making some progress. The worry from now forward is the flooding aspect right down here in southern Brazil. because as we look out over the next 10 days, that's the total accumulated precipitation. Some places down here picking up 125 to 200 millimeters of rainfall. Now, what are these states? This would be Santa Catarina, northern Rio Grande do Sul, which is here, and Paraná, where they made some major planting progress. So this is a lot of flooding rain in southern Brazil. Like we talked about yesterday, Argentina continuing to see the long-term drought stress, but these are near normal rains coming into parts of central Brazil, meaning normal planting pace or faster than normal planting pace. The holdouts are the Amazon and over here in eastern Brazil. If you want to see this same map compared to average, this is a 10-day forecast of precipitation anomalies. So when you see these colors into this is wetter than average here. And this is, of course, extremely wet. But down here into Uruguay, the Paraná River Basin, Argentina, this is now, what are we getting on here? Over 24 months of drought development in this area. Watch it carefully because El Niños typically bring in rainfall into this area. But what's a typical El Niño? That's the case I think we're trying to build. All right, thanks for hanging with me again this Thursday morning. I'll talk to you again tomorrow. Have a good one. Thank you.